The National Assembly has released the breakdown of its own budget, and you know, how has this release of its own budget, how does it speak to the allegations in some quarters that perhaps there has been some level of padding insider misappropriation of the funds, and also not, you know, fulfilling that mandate to execute capital projects?
Really, I think for the first time, after so much noise and then too much engagement with the legislators, we are actually seeing the National Assembly's budget. Of course, we now know, formally we don't know, that the National Assembly will have to spend about 74 million on sewage charge. Of course, we complained that the executive is spending about 50-something million on sewage charge. You know, we could go on and on. Formally, we had absolutely no idea about what's going on. We now understand that the National Assembly is going to spend 7.7 billion on purchase of cars. Now we can see that. So in terms of perception about, whether the National Assembly is actually misappropriating fund or mismanaging, sorry, not misappropriating, mismanaging, which is actually a motive thing, we could actually look at the document and grasp knowledge from it. But notwithstanding that, we have to understand that the federal government's budget is just a daft, just a small portion of what is spent across of the federation itself. State government collectively plans to spend roughly about above 5 trillion naira. Also.
So expect also what the National Assembly has done. They should follow suit and make transparent their own budgets to the letter.
Certainly, certainly. Then you look at, of course, the tax collector, the Federal Inland Revenue Service, that spend roughly, we don't even know how much they spend. Some people say it's 50 billion, 60 billion. We have absolutely no idea how this money is spent. Of course, the judiciary is also there, 100 billion this year's budget. If you look at the statutory allocation, 100 billion. How will this money be spent? Absolutely no knowledge. So now, since the National Assembly have been able to place their own budget on the table for everybody to see, every single agency of government should follow suit. And it also should, should resonate across all the states also.
Let's look at the figures, if we could have that slide come through. We're looking at some of the sectoral allocations: education, power, health, defense, transport, the Niger Delta, Interior, Ministry of Interior, and the biggest scope is coming into transportation. We're seeing power first, then transportation, 529 billion, and then 262 billion for transportation. One would wonder and say that perhaps when we're looking at the Power, Works and Housing Ministry, which is considered as the super ministry, that much, 529 billion naira, can it achieve anything?
Oh, really? If we look closely again at the budget, the way the budget is prepared, we could actually point holes. But really, if you look at the budget closely, about 5 trillion is going into recurrent expenditure. About 1.8 trillion, thereabout, is going into servicing debts and doing one thing or the other. So if you look at it, okay, power sector, to build a power plant, how much do you need? You'll be looking at how much? To just do 1,000 megawatts of electricity. Really, the budget are very limited. The limit to which the budget can actually impact on some of those issues is very, of course, it's actually subjected. But notwithstanding, the perception out there is very clear and it's simple. If the government is actually clear on how much we plan to spend and their policy framework guiding this spending, and everybody could see it white and black, that this is what I plan to spend, and this will be the probable impact of what I'm spending on. It's not that 25% of the money is actually falling into another hand, and they could see. Of course, the private sector could actually step in and bridge that gap. Notwithstanding that, allocations are just allocations. These are just allocations. Releases are also very, very important. To what degree do you release money to these sectors? Of course, the transportation sector, we'll be investing a lot in rails and other things. Of course, we plan to renovate, of course, the Abuja rail, the Abuja runway. We are trying to invest in rails. So it's actually important and critical. We are actually spending on housing, power sector. But we have to understand also there's still this loose context around the fact that we still need to build capacity. We need to look at our education sector. We need to go deep. So really, people can still argue that the allocation is still not smooth enough.
I am really curious in looking at this budget, if this budget is one budget that can get us out of recession, because we've had we must have a back-to-back positive figures, yes, quarter on quarter, before we can conveniently say that we're out of recession. When you look at this budget, and the government says that we're getting out of recession, do you want to believe them if they say that with a budget like this, we will be out of recession?
Well, now, deep down, let's look at it closely. We have three parts of the budget. You have the revenue angle, you have the expenditure angle, and then you have the debt angle. If you look at the revenue angle, are we saying that the government plans to raise approximately how much from CIT, company income tax? Are we saying they can raise that to actually inject the money into the economy? Really, if you look at it on the optimistic side, we say, oh, the budget of the federal government in terms of revenue projection around, of course, the company income tax is overly optimistic. If you look at the customs activity at the port, because of the foreign currency front and back, which is still not clear today, although we are seeing some level of stability and other things, it's still not very clear. So do you look at, if you look closely at, of course, the revenue flowing in through the port, are we saying is 100% accurate? Whether we like it or not, the revenue of government the last 16 years has always been optimistic. We only raise benchmark. So in clear terms, the revenue that you're looking at is about 5 trillion is going to fall short. So really, then we jump into the expenditure angle. How much are we spending on? We're spending on servicing debt. Of course, the bankers will most likely be smiling, which is good. But what impact? I mean, if you're spending 1.8 trillion on just servicing debt itself, of course, the investors, you have to meet your obligations, and the bankers can smile at that.
So one word, are we getting out of recession or not?
Well, I can't say the budget, the fiscal policy is enough to actually lift us out of the recession. I think it's a combination of three things. Number one, the monetary policy must be aligned with fiscal policies, and more importantly, our trade policy also must actually fall in line with that before we can say the policy of government lift Nigeria out of recession. But Nigeria, meanwhile, Nigeria actually resilient.
Let me ask you a personal question. Do you like this budget?
Apparently, no. I don't like the budget. I don't think the budget actually speaks for people. I could actually stick my head out.
In whose favor is this budget?
Well, the budget clearly actually favors, of course, government officials. Primarily, the budget is actually designed, of course, to pay salaries of workers, to borrow money to pay salaries. That cannot work for me.
The deficit is about just over 2 trillion.
Yeah, but really, if you look at
how are we going to finance that?
Yeah, of course, we have the domestic angle. We are going to borrow money from the domestic money. We are going to lift money. We are going to do one thing or the other, take loans from this, take loans. But the reality is this. Let's look at it closely. It's not about borrowing. If we are borrowing, where are we spending? But if you look closely at the capital expenditure, you see that we are borrowing more than we are injecting into capital expenditure.
I'm afraid that that's where we're going to leave it. Atiku Samuel, lead research budget. Many thanks indeed for talking to us on State of the Nation. When we return, we will focus on the politics in Abia State and the Supreme Court's judgment on the Governor Okeze Ikpeazu. Stay with us.